Hello, greetings, and welcome everyone to the ASL review for Week 4, Season 11. I am SirMoth, and you are Lord Brad. I don't know why we still have these names up here. SirMoth, Lord Brad.
I
Ian just decided that. I guess we're going with it, but
guess I never liked it, but here we are.
yeah, too lazy to backspace those 4 words on your username. 4 letters, whatever.
Uh,
Anyway, uh, this was again, I've said it over and over again. This was a fun week to watch. As always, one thing is, we didn't see any particular set that we wanted to label as set of the week, so we're going to have a little bit of a surprise at the very back of the video. But, other than that, starting off with match 1, we had Dirty Logic versus Lillay. And this was a match that I found rather unfortunate for 2 reasons on Dirty Logic's side. One, looking at Dirty Logic's team, there are only 2 total Pokemon that can deal with Corviknight. Those being the Mega Charizard X and the Rotom Wash. And other than that, the entire roster is just hardwalled by that thing. Maybe there are some tricky sets, but for the most part, that's all. And then the second thing, I think it was turn 2, Mega Altaria body slammed Mega Charizard X and got the paralysis. So, despite that, it was still a really fun game to watch because even though the Mega Charizard X did get paralyzed, it still managed to put in a lot more work than a paralyzed sweeper usually can. It managed to, I believe, take out the Mega Altaria, got some good damage on Inteleon, and I think it was Piloswine that finally took it down on a full para, but overall, I think that it was a really fun match. Mew with Nasty Plot was nasty. And yeah, you got any thoughts on it?
it was a really good match. I think Dirty Logic is getting better. I
Oh,
think you
I
can
agree.
see in his play choices, in his prep choices. I know he's a good partner in prep with Peach helping him out. You can see the improvement week after week, and that's really exciting. Lillay's been a nice addition to our roster of coaches this season. Played well, drafted beautifully, playing his draft really well. I thought it went down as a good match. To me, it didn't look like a 1-3 team versus a 3-1 team. I thought it was close. I thought it was competitive.
Mm-hmm.
The round 2 paralysis was unfortunate, and it did have a pretty big role in the match. Charizard having the ability to get up to a +1 speed would have been nice. Would have been threatening, certainly. Body Slam is kind of a premier move on Mega Altaria. I think if you're running physical Mega Altaria, Slam pretty often, especially nowadays that return doesn't exist, at least in our league. It's a featured move, and something's going to come and something's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We found consistently that Corviknight is just hard to get rid of. I see it in this league. I see it in other leagues. Corviknight, that steel flying typing, man. That steel flying typing is just really annoying. And you see it across the board. Pretty much everything that's steel flying, that at least the things I can think of off the top of my head, are just annoying to deal with. But it was a well played match.
Yeah.
I think it came down to a 2-0 for Lillay. So I think, good wins are all around, good plays all around. Charizard was threatening. The Corviknight was a problem. Piloswine actually picked up a couple of kills. It was a clean match. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And if I was to give one small tip to Dirty Logic, every time that Durant came in, it did end up clicking like First Impression, Iron Head, something like that, just clicking a move to hit what's in front of it, which is good, but Lillay was bringing in that Corviknight every time. So
Sure.
there were a few opportunities where I think Dirty Logic could have instead made a double into Rotom Wash and then clicked maybe Volt Switch because Piloswine doesn't want to switch in and gotten some momentum there. That's nothing against the actual play that went down. I think that Dirty Logic did indeed play very well, but just one extra little tidbit.
Similarly, if I would say that the one thing I noticed when I was watching the match live that I did think, oh, this is probably going to come back to haunt him, is he basically donated a full health Mamoswine to a nasty plotted Mew. He swapped a full health Mamoswine into Mew. It took 99%. Then he ice sharded Mew for a minuscule amount and lost his Mamoswine. And that's such a good Mon to have really not been given a chance to perform.
Yeah.
But you hate to see that. Not that it had its best matchup here anyway, because it's facing an Inteleon, a Mew, a Corviknight. It's not going to maybe do a ton, but gosh, it's such a great Mon to have not been given a chance.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, looking at it again, it is a really bad matchup for Mamoswine. I'm not sure if there was any other better thing to... Because I think probably at that point, a lot of what you're going to switch in is just going to be a sack. So maybe that was a case of Mamoswine just being the least valuable member at the time.
Could be, but I live and die by a principle that great Mons do great things when they click buttons. I know that sounds really simple, but good things happen when premier Mons click buttons. And Mamoswine is a premier Mon, and it just has that ability to just click buttons and make good things happen. Don't know that it would have in this match. I agree it didn't have a great opportunity to do what it likes to do, but I've never seen a whole lot of horrible things happen when Mamoswine clicks really powerful moves.
Yeah, that's certainly a good philosophy to live by, at least in your Pokemon matches.
Moving on to match 2, you've got Melone. Melone was really hoping for a win here, really needing a win. But gosh, Nemo's top tier again. We continue to say it week after week, but his A Mons are a problem. They are a problem. Even if they don't have great games, Blastoise essentially did nothing as far as the stat sheet would tell you. But you got to prep for it. You got to work on it. You gotta look at it. You got to know what's coming. You got to bring sets for it. And they open doors for other things to perform well. When you have a Mon like a Shell Smash Blastoise, like a Dragon Dance, hold on just a second. Go.
Alright.
I'll be right back.
Alright. Well, I guess I can go on and pick up where he was leaving off. Basically, when you have these fantastic Pokemon, like he said, it really does allow other things to shine. I think in this match in particular, Noivern really shone on Nemo's side with Defog. Hurricane was dealing a ton of damage, and particularly had a good matchup against Mega Gallade, which was one of Malone's biggest threats. The Zeraora being able to outspeed the Mega Gallade was also really important. It didn't pick up a kill, but it was able to get a ton of damage, and that, again, I think Mega Gallade was one of Malone's biggest threats, so just getting a lot of chip on it, even if Zeraora didn't do anything else that match, which it did, it took down the fortress, it would still be a valuable trade right there. So even when they aren't the star, these 3 Pokemon, I loathe the day that I have to prep against this team, honestly, because it is terrifying. Speed, setup, offensive pressure out the wazoo, in addition to stuff like Florges, which can really pivot around with wish passing and stuff. It's a terrifying team.
Melone did some things that were just right. He brought the Gallade. If you draft Gallade, I think you pretty much bring it every week. It's that kind of a Mon. It's probably the best Mega in format right now. And He drafts the Gallade, or he picks up the Gallade last week. He brings the Gallade. He heals up the Gallade with a wish. He makes sure that he has a healthy Gallade to be able to get into battles and do work. It does work. At least it pressures Nemo quite a bit. Um, I would have liked to have seen. I know he's got the Zero Aura there, but maybe a scarfed Zapdos with Hurricane and um, maybe Thunderbolt. I think that'd have been interesting. I don't know what it would have done, but at least would have been interesting this week. Um,
Yeah.
it was a good match. Nemo again, similar to Lillay, a really nice ad for us this season. Adds to our stable of coaches, and clearly my daughter's a big fan because she broke in to my room right as I went to talk about Nemo. So, you know, it's off to you, Nemo. My 3-year-old thinks you are killing it.
Yeah, might have something to do with a certain movie that happened somewhere.
Hey. On to match 3, you're up.
Yeah, so match 3, this was a very decisive match for Ian. And mostly because of just, again, Ian is proving that the first couple of turns are right where things happen. Tornadus came in on Nidoqueen as the lead, and Air Slash took off 60%. Air Slash took off 60% of Braviary. Couple switches later, Tornadus is back in again. Air Slash takes out the rest of Braviary. Just an insane start, and that really led the path to Doublade, which is actually a Pokemon that, on matchup, I wouldn't think that Doublade could do much at all.
Had a terrible matchup.
Yeah, like it Shadow Sneaks the Dragapult, but Dragapult with Shadow Ball, Greninja with Dark Pulse, Infernape with Fire moves, Nidoqueen, probably one of the best counters on Brett's team, but the stars aligned, Nidoqueen was taken down a notch, and Doublade came in on Ferrothorn, got a free sub on the Leech Seed, got a free Sword Stance, and proceeded to take out a total of 3 more Pokemon before being forced out, and at that point it was a 5v2, and Ian just got it.
I mean, this is one of those matches where team preview, in my opinion, it really favored Brett. I thought it looked like he might have a little bit of problems dealing with Sharpedo, but otherwise, I thought his team looked ready. He had, I thought, the right mons. It looked to me, watching the game, I thought that Brett had a really good spot. But again, like you mentioned earlier, like we've continued to mention this season, Ian does this thing, and it's something future coaches should be looking at, where he just brings massive, massive damage, or at least absorbs massive damage. One of the two is going to happen in those first handful of turns. And I mean, when Tornadus did 60% with, what was it, Air Slash?
Yeah, Air Slash.
I was wildly confused.
I didn't actually look at it. Was that specs or something? I didn't look at any calcs, but
all I know is Nidoqueen not supposed to take 60% from basically.
Yeah,
it's not super effective. So when it took 60%, I know I, just as a spectator, was like, "Oh God, something's about to happen here." Like you said, 19-turn match usually means it was a blowout, and it wasn't. It was only a 3-0. But the word decisive is probably the right word to have selected. Stuff happens. You're playing a high-level game, and sometimes 1 or 2 turns, and it's kind of over.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times the biggest way that really good players can lose is unanticipated damage on turn 1. There have been so many games where I've seen 2 really good players going at it, but turn 1, it's like an unexpected scarf or something like that just takes out whatever was going to set up hazards, and from there, the other player is just on the back foot. You can't really do much if you unexpectedly lose one of your best Pokemon, or in this case, just take a ton of damage.
Sure, and it's the hardest turn to predict. It's by far the hardest turn to predict because nothing is revealed yet. All you know is they're 6 and you're 6. It's a tough one. So moving on to match 4. I remember at the end of last week, I had mentioned that there were a couple of marquee matches coming. This was one of the matches I was really excited for. Static's been playing really well, and IL Kid's been playing really well. This was the kind of match that I was looking forward to, and it was a really fun match, honestly. The stat sheets would make it seem as if, basically it was Embor versus the world, but it really wasn't. It was a competitive match back and forth with a decent amount of success on both sides, in my opinion. A little bit of bad luck, but, welcome to Mons. And I say this, and I say it, but I mean it. Like, if you don't want hacks to show up in your battles, go play checkers, because hacks usually doesn't show up in checkers. But if you're accepting hacks into your life when you make the choice to play a Pokemon, and it happened this match. There were some things that maybe were a little unfortunate, but it was a well played match. It was a competitive match between two good coaches. I really liked the bulk up Tornadus Incarnate. That was really crafty. It played well. It was strong. It blew back a Cresselia, which is always a problem child to deal with. So you love to see that. I did not understand, and maybe you can explain it to me, what in the world Static was doing with his Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to ask you the same thing, because, like, I was thinking of every possibility. There was no passive damage on Tapu Lele. There was no roll to keep the sub. There was no way you're PP stalling out a 24 PowerPoint move.
So for those that don't know, or can't see the match, at about turn 13, Grimmsnarl comes in full health on a Tapu Lele that's only taking spikes damage, and proceeds to just sub protect. At some point, IL clicks Calm Mind, so the sub stays up, and you see a Darkest Lariat do a healthy chunk to Tapu, maybe 60-ish% or something like that. But then we just go back to sub protect because the Lele is outspeeding, and we just kind of do that for a handful of turns, and I'm still not sure what we gained from that.
Yeah, the only thing that changed was Grimmsnarl went down on health each round.
That was a bit of a confusing sequence, but to Static's credit, if IL got bored, abandoned plan, then something could have happened there.
Yeah.
Could have got the sub up. So maybe he was hoping that IL would just have a small seizure and click the wrong button. I don't really know what he was hoping for, but it didn't seem to happen. Continually, Embor, and Embor is just a problem. Embor is so powerful, but it seemed like every time Embor got on the field, something took a big hit. And it played out well. It was a great match. So both guys are 3-1, so their seasons are looking solid. That's kind of what you're hoping for at kind of the first quarter of the season, if you will. So fun match. I enjoyed it. Hats off to Static for the big win.
Yeah, certainly. So next, I mean, you were talking about earlier people who have been added to the league who have been great additions. Unfortunately, in this case, one of those players may not be quite that. However, this was...
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, like, absolutely. I think that if one of these players was to drop out of the league, namely the one that starts with B, then it might just be a much better place for everyone. But anyway, this was our match, and this was a super, super close match. I guess we can do this a little differently since we have 100% of the insight, and I can go over kind of what my thought process on a lot of this was. First off, Your team was a terror to prep against. I had to re-prep and re-prep and re-prep more than I ever have before, because no matter what lineup I brought, I was always letting at least 2 of your Pokemon just decimate me. In this case, I brought 6-Mon Poliwrath to deal with your Copperajah, and instead Tangrowth came. Hindsight, should have seen it coming, but really, I didn't have too much way to deal with that outside of Victini and Flamethrower Electros, which Victini, I didn't want to switch in case of knockoff. Electros takes a ton from Power Whip, which I also wasn't expecting. I was expecting a special set because, I don't know, maybe I was special. But yeah, I do think this was a really fun match. I brought 2 Assault Vests because you have a very heavily specially invested team. And I thought I brought a lot of good sets. Trick Room Victini actually turned 40. There was a big 50-50 moment where if I had clicked Trick Room, I would have actually swept, because Trick Room V-creates lowering your speed, which is effectively increasing it. I could have just outsped and killed your team there, what was left of it. But I didn't, and you ended up getting, I think, a very well-deserved win there.
It was a good match. It was a fun match. It was a back and forth match. I made a lot of transactions at the end of last week. I still think my roster was good enough to get wins, but it wasn't working for me, or I wasn't working for it. One of the two, either way, regardless. Bringing in Tapu Koko is almost never a bad thing. I think that Mon's the best Mon in Draft League. Was excited to get my hands on it again, and it played well. It played well, but it dictated prep well, which is something that it specializes in. And it took some hits. I mean, Tapu Koko kind of swapped in at a couple of different points in this match, was able to roost up a couple of times and take some damage that maybe wasn't expected. I did expect a Assault Vest Lando. That was what I thought you would bring, and it was as annoying as I thought it would be. So that was unfortunate. Would have rather not seen that show up, which would have been a different variant. But it was exactly what I'd hoped it wouldn't be, and it perpetually was annoying. The volley didn't do what I'd hoped it would, but it was good. It was a good Mon. Deontay is annoying to face, but at the end of the day, it was just a tight turn-to-turn battle. Each turn was really an attempt to gain momentum, back and forth and back and forth. And I don't really know that either of us had a good hold on momentum. For more than 2 or 3 turns at a time, it tended to bounce back and forth. I was able to stay ahead of that a little bit easier with my Silvally Love, which eventually, of course, I lost it. But the Tangrowth was incredible. Tangrowth was fabulous. I do lament that turn 17 Power Whip miss. That was extremely annoying. But it's Power Whip. It's Mons.
Yeah.
Crap happens. What can you do?
Yeah, and thanks to my own prep of bringing Rain Dance with 2 fire move attackers, you didn't end up taking nearly as much as you would have if I had prepped differently. So
is the exact reason I stayed in. I was like, well, worst case, I'm gonna miss, and it's in the rain, so I'm gonna be okay. And that's exactly what happened. But what can you do? Stuff happens. I will say, I wasn't able to get Charizard to do anything. That's okay. It didn't work out. But looking at your particular team, I really think a Scarf Victini was probably the way to go.
I agree.
Know that it, could theory Mon out what could have happened. Scarf Victini would have been an issue. That would have been really annoying to deal with. Happened. We played the game the way it was, and it was a really fun match. It was a really tight match, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do have one question, and you don't have to say anything if you don't want to reveal your secrets or whatever, but why were you Surf on Silvally over Multi-Attack? I guess saying it out loud now, you probably had other special coverage moves and didn't want to invest otherwise. So maybe I
Um,
answered your question, but
yeah, I just wanted to be able to run the Thunderbolt to hit Slowbro if it came.
okay.
So wanted to be able. That's really it. I wanted to be able to hit the Slowbro fairly hard, not super hard because I didn't invest in special attack much. I had like 36 or something like that. I don't remember what it was exactly. Um, so I just wanted to parlay that and stay on the special side with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just something. I was actually full special defense Diancie. Had I known you were going to be Surf instead of. Because multi attack was demolishing it. So had I known you were Surf, that would have been a way different game. But.
Um, yeah, it was a fun match. You know, I anticipated coming into the match that Tangrowth was going to be a big deal. And it was because I was assured, and I know you and I talked about the match as soon as it was over, but I was 100% sure Sceptile was coming, and I was 90% sure it was going to be Swords Dance. So I knew I was bringing Tangrowth from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was one of those cases. Maybe if I had brought other moves, I could have beat the Tangrowth, but whatever. Theory Moning is. We could do that all day, but let's not.
It's fun though. It was a good match, and I'm looking forward to seeing you hopefully continue to have a solid season moving forward. It was tough.
Yeah,
So that's
if
what
I
you hope
could
for.
if I could have a rematch in playoffs, that would be perfect. So if I get
Yeah,
there, you better get there too.
I hope so. I think I have missed the playoffs once. Oh, quit one season. I just couldn't care about Monsless at that point. And I wasn't having a great season at that point. So I know I missed. And I took over a team at week 7, maybe, and missed the playoffs by a week. So I don't know. But I'm hoping to make it. Planning on it. Just got a little bit of work to do.
Yeah.
Moving on to match 6. Boy, was this not the match we expected. What do you think? I'm going to let you talk about this match really quick because my kids are still kid things. And I'll be
Okay.
right back.
All right. Well, this match was very interesting. It did start off really strong, with Scarf Drakazult just dealt a massive chunk to Delmise and then 2-hit KO'd Kirim on like turns 1 through 3 or something like that, which was absolutely insane. That's a huge amount of momentum to start off the match with. But unfortunately, Peaches said that he had some IRL stuff happen, and that happened turn 2, and I don't want to theory craft too much on what could have happened, because Peaches did say that things would have gone very differently. What did end up happening is Klefki somehow got 4 more kills and no more deaths, so it's currently sitting at 13-0 in 4 weeks. This Klefki is going to be. It's going to start plaguing my nightmares pretty soon at this rate.
Or eventually people will just start prepping for it.
Yeah, I mean, that might be an alternative, but
I'm looking at Peach's side, and I'm looking for things that have stab super effective moves to hit Klefki. And I'm going to keep looking till I find it. And it may not be till next week.
yeah.
Because it sure didn't show up this time. Yeah, and Peach had some IRL stuff happen that I think took his focus away from the match, so it may have messed around with the results a little bit, but that didn't happen in this match. You know what I mean? Like, IRL stuff happens, but the field of battle that we play on is this Pokemon Showdown server, and what happened in this match was a very decided victory for TCP. So congrats to TCP. He's off to quite the streak. We had a really fun match early in the season. I'm happy to see him performing well, as he typically does. He's known to perform well. Pete is still 3-1. Things are looking up for him.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I'm hoping see at some point Mega Diancie spread its wings a little bit. It has not reached the levels that I anticipated it reaching, especially with some of the moves that it picked up this season. I know we talked about it last week, so I hate to put you on the spot here, but do you have any idea what Mega Diancie's spread is through the first 4 weeks?
No, I do not.
It's 1-1.
Hmm.
That's not what you're looking for. A top tier elite Mon, not as just a top tier Mega, but just any top tier elite Mon. You're not looking for 1-1 in 4 games. So I'm hoping to see at some point Mega Diancie start to get some traction.
Yeah, I'm sure it will at some point, and that's one of the things I will say is when top tiers don't perform super well like early on, that can actually be somewhat advantageous because a lot of times when that happens, at least in my case, if I see someone not performing with a Pokemon and I play against them, I maybe won't prep as hard against it. But that is something you do have to keep in mind. It can always rise up, and who knows, maybe it'll get, like, maybe it'll be 18-1 by the end of the season, so.
Just too good of a Mon to not be performing. It's just too good. Mega Diancie should be able to universally perform well. It's not yet, but I do anticipate that will come.
Yeah.
So our featured set of the week, or our featured match of the week, was, this was heat. This was a fun match. What team preview? Who did you have? Who were you thinking at team preview? This one.
I'll be honest. Team preview. I had it down as Dravos. I knew that it. Like, I didn't think that there was an overwhelming chance, but I did think that Dravos certainly had one of maybe just a slightly higher chance.
I'll tell you the first thing that I noticed at team preview. I don't think I got to see this one live. I believe I watched the replay of this one. The first thing I noticed at team preview is where'd Dravos' threats go? Where'd they go? Because I'm pretty sure he drafted a Zygarde, a Gengar, a Weavile. Like, where'd all the offense go? Did it take a vacation? And then conversely, when I've been over here kind of looking at Shadow, like, all right, well, some weeks he doesn't bring Hydreigon, some weeks he doesn't let it click buttons, some weeks he doesn't bring Kartana. Like, oh, he brought all his offense this week. So at team preview, I was leaning towards Shadow because I'm looking at it and saying, oh, Shadow brought all his offense. Dravos brought some wish passing, which is cool, but I didn't see the offense.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I thought that I saw a Toxtricity sweep having a lot of potential, and I also thought that Mega Aggron would be doing a ton of work in this match.
Yeah, but I do like just the pure guts of these two coaches to be like, you know what? Who stops Volt Switches? I don't care about that this week. I'm just gonna let it happen.
Yeah,
It was a fun team preview, and usually team previews I just give it a glance, but this one was one I remember particularly staring at it and thinking to myself, "Oh wow, this is going to be interesting."
yeah, and I think that bringing 2 Wish Passers for Dravos was. I normally wouldn't think of doing that because usually it's like, okay, you want one cleric to heal up your team and then the other one maybe just run. Well, I guess they don't have Sylveon does have Moonlight, so yeah, I was kind of surprised by the double Wish Passers, but it really worked out because they were able to support each other really well too.
Yeah, Tana got to click some turns, which was nice. It did a nice healthy chunk to Alamola, which is just unnecessarily thick. Alamola is unnecessarily bulky. I just want to point that out in case you didn't know. But it was nice to see Cartana get in there and take some turns, even though it didn't take any kills. Still nice to see. What's Cartana's base attack? That's insane. It's like 181, I think. Or
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
it's absolutely ridiculous. It was nice to see that. And finally, we saw Hydreigon doing some things, right? We saw Hydreigon clicking some buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Good things happen. Mine's buttons, bro. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
For Dravos, where you're just looking at the stat sheet and you see that if I told you coming in the match, Dravos' kill leader is going to be Alamamola. Probably going to favor Static on that match.
Yeah. One thing that I think that my favorite set that came this week was the Orbeetle. Because Orbeetle, for me, is always one of those Pokemon that just... It always runs under my radar, but then it always does great stuff. And in this case, we saw, like, Conkeldurr doing 22% with Stab Drain Punch to Alomomola, while Orbeetle managed to set up to +6 defense and was doing 46% to Alomomola. Now, it did get Toxic stalled out, but I don't think that if it wasn't Toxic, if it could have avoided that, I think that that thing would have just swept the entire team because it was so bulky, even on the special side.
Well, in the midst of getting stalled out, it also really blew back a Noctowl. I mean,
Yeah.
it 100%ed a Noctowl.
Yeah, that Noctowl saw 0.2 seconds of screen time.
I mean, for a Noctowl, hey, that's not bad. You had to show up. I mean, you at least got on the bus. You got to be excited about that.
Yeah. I am kind of curious. The Cradilly, it looked like it was designed to specifically counter the Milotic, which it did to an extent because it took the Scalds, but it was, I believe, Worry Seed, or no, Gastro Acid and Power Whip, and it was really disconcerting because one, Gastro Acid Milotic can just switch out for free. And two, Power Whip wasn't actually out damaging it through recover, because like with the burn it was only gaining 6% a turn or something.
I think this is be a symptom of what we've seen from the past few weeks of Shadow, though, because what Shadow died to the last few weeks? Grass types, right?
Yeah.
So the recipe for beating Shadow is what? Bring your grass type. It just happened to be that this grass type maybe wasn't as adequately prepared as a Bandit Breloom.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Although I did see quite a few opportunities to bring in the oh man, I am blanking on so many names. The Toxtricity on the Milotic. Like with some doubling around, you could have gotten it to where it wasn't clicking Scald for that turn, and Toxtricity was spec, so it wasn't like it was being saved in the back for a shift gear sweep or anything like that. I feel like Toxtricity's role was supposed to be to counter Milotic, and it just didn't happen till like one of the last turns of the game.
Yeah. But Toxtricity is also a mon that really doesn't like hitting Hydreigon. It could have come in more, and it probably would have been able to certainly do more work. But it also didn't really want to let Hydreigon come in on a 30-ish% move and start clicking buttons either. So I maybe understand why he didn't try to put it out on the field every couple of turns, because it let gateways that Hydreigon to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see that, and I won't say that it was an egregious misplay or anything, but I do still think that even just getting a bit of chip on the Hydreigon could have switched out. I mean, you had some decent resists to both stabs in the Sylveon and in the Mega Aggron before those two went down. So some switching around, I still think that it would have been beneficial, but
I will say, high level match, man. D3 turns of one misstep and losing a lot of momentum. It was a good match and really well played. By far, Shadow's best performance this season. I thought he was really on point throughout most of the match. And I do joke about Dravos not bringing his elite threats as far as offensive goes, but his team really didn't perform poorly, and we don't know what his knockdown set was because it did get 100%ed on the swap in. So that may have been, a really nice set that could have had a lot to offer this particular week.
Yeah.
But we didn't get to see it. And Eval is wonderful. Guard is wonderful. But neither one of those is just jumping up and down to take on a Milotic. So
Yeah.
really don't fault Dravos' prep, although I did make a joke about it. I really don't fault it. I feel like I kind of get where he was coming from. Still probably would have liked to have seen maybe one of those big offensive threats because they are so stinking nice. But it was a really nice match. I like Shadow's use of Rotom Frost. He's brought it a couple of weeks now, and it's been fairly threatening. You like to see those E-tier mons getting some love. And really, Rotoms, all the Rotoms are so nice. They have such versatility. With boots and being a thing now, they're so great. A really well-played match. E3 turns is a lot of turns for a Pokemon match, but I think Shadow's best performance.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, when we were talking earlier, I said this was my favorite match to watch this week because it just so much back and forth. And I mean, maybe I'm choosing favorites a little here, but I really loved the double wish. That to me just was so fun to watch all of that because I agree that every turn I think that good plays were being made. Like maybe not the most optimal every turn or anything like that, but every single turn an important decision was made that influenced all of the rest of the turns, and that's exactly what you're looking for. This was not okay, one Pokemon clicks some buttons, sweeps the team, done. It was certainly high level.
Yeah. I think what ultimately allowed Shadow to start putting in some real high level work is when we saw the Sylveon go down. Sylveon played a big role in being able to hold off that Hydreigon. And when we saw Sylveon get really low chipped, that was a really good sign for Shadow's team.
Yeah, the Conkeldurr set was really good. It was bulky Assault Vest, and it had the Poison Jab for Sylveon, and that turn, even if Sylveon had clicked the Hyper Voice, I calced it out, and the Conkeldurr wasn't dying to that. And it was always killing with Poison Jab. So that was a really good bring. I always think that one of the best ways to really gain an advantage is to counter Pokemon with Pokemon that should normally beat it. So like in this case, you would normally think, okay, Sylveon beats Conkeldurr every time. But in this case, the roles were swapped. Conkeldurr took out Sylveon and survived the Specs Boom Burst from Toxtricity to deal a lot of damage to that.
Yeah. Good performances. Bravos is another new add to the league. I like having him in our stable of coaches. He's performing well, and I know he's only 1-3, but I haven't watched a Dravos match thus far where I looked at it and said, God, it looks like he's clueless. I think he's a good coach. I think he's doing good things, and I expect good things to happen for him as the season goes on.
Yeah. So, next up, we have a couple transactions, only 2 from one player this week. And it's starting off, Ian dropped his Zygarde 10% and added a Rhyperior.
Listen, none of that matters. The fact that you so obsessed with how the transaction slide looked last week and that you worked so hard to make the transaction slide look better this week.
Okay. I will don't applaud yet because Brett actually contacted me and he said, "Hey, you want to borrow our season 10 slides?" And I was like, or no, season 8, and I was like, "Yeah." And so I pretty much just copied and pasted it, except I used this format.
Listen, I just know that you're pumped about it because you were pretty obsessed with last week's
Oh
slides.
yeah, last week I threw those slides together, and every time I looked at it, that was awful. But I think this looks a decent amount better. So props to whoever actually put effort into this in the
I
past.
will say in this particular, for this transaction, there are two mons that do two completely different things, although they do share a common typing. But they're as vastly different as you could get. I actually really like iGuard 10% at the price that you have to pay for it. It's a tier D mon. That's our biggest tier. You've got 4 selections from tier D. It's a really crafty mon. Have in that tier D slot. Problem that Ian was running to is that was his only ground type. He didn't supplement Zygarde 10% with any other ground type. And Zygarde 10% wants to come in, maybe be banded, maybe get off a big damage hit, swap out. It doesn't want to be swapping into anything. So it being your only ground type is it's a problem.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I will preface this with saying I think that this was certainly a good trade. I also think that Ian was maybe underestimating the Zydog, because I know that, like, even in my match, Zygarde just decimated my team and it didn't come, and he's been kind of talking down on it a little bit. But one of the biggest things that Ian got from this transaction is Stealth Rocks. So with the like, one of his biggest problems earlier was Nihiligo and Necrozma were the only 2 rockers, and they'd rather be doing offensive stuff. Well, Rhyperior wants to be doing rocks, so
I just think, and I get what you're saying. I do think he is underestimating what Zydog, as I like to call it, could do. Zydog just doesn't. It doesn't need to be your only ground. He didn't have a premier ground anywhere else, so I get the move. I hate to
yeah.
see it because I really like the mon, and I think at the value we have it, it's a nice pick for the budget. But not on his roster. It wasn't fitting his roster.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that one.
Next move, he dropped Typhlosion, added the OU Legend of whatever gen it came out in. It's crazy to me still to think that this thing was OU when it came out. People thought it was going to be crazy good. It has not been, but it's just the kind of sneaky mon that I think you can use well. It's got enough weird sets and weird options, and it can do the shell smashing. It can do some other things. I actually think it's one of those kind of mons that he'll probably use better than it deserves to be used.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing, when Zygarde 10% went away, that was a drop dragon type, so this brings back the dragon type to the team. But also, I think I really agree on the point of versatility. I mean, Typhlosion, it does a couple things. It has Flash Fire to switch into those fire type moves, and Scarf Eruption is pretty good. And maybe it can do something else if you're really creative. But then you go over to the Turtonator, and it has stuff like Shell Smash that you have to prep for just as much as Eruption, can be just as threatening, maybe even more so. More coverage, rapid spin, just a whole lot of good things that it can do. I think that this was another excellent trade. And for an A-plus team, from my opinion, a perfect team getting even more perfect in my eyes.
I mean, it's unfortunate that it has such a trash coach. You know, I had to see the roster getting better.
Yeah.
Welcome me in.
All right. So the little extra section that we're adding on to the end here, instead of doing a set of the week this week, we are actually going over some of the free agents that we think could be some really amazing pickups for you. So if you still have transactions available and think that maybe you need to spice something up, maybe something isn't working, you want to add just a little bit of pressure onto your opponent's prep, then these are maybe some of the Pokemon you should be looking out for. Why don't you go ahead and start us off with one?
I'll just say that by example for my roster. Clefable's a good mon. Clefable had a role in my team. I needed to spice up something. I needed to do something different because I wasn't getting the results that I was expecting. So I brought in Tapu Koko, and hey, it worked out. Could I have won that match with Clefable? Maybe. I don't know. But did win that match with Tapu Koko. So if your season's not going the way you want it to, regardless of what that means, maybe you're 2-2 and you want it to be something better, or maybe you're 1-3 or 0-4, or you're 3-1 and you just feel like the roster's not performing the way you are. You want it. There's some crazy good mons still available. The first one I have clicked here to look at is Hawlucha. Hawlucha is so much better with close combat, and Brave Bird terrain stuff is still there. Hawlucha's a really crazy good mon, especially considering that Tapu Bulu and Tapu Fini are both still available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hawlucha can absolutely just sweep out of nowhere, and that's, if you want to spice up your draft, adding Hawlucha and maybe a terrain user could, I mean, that's a big change in strategy for almost any team.
Would be a big change, but is an option. It's the kind of mon that I'm surprised is a free agent. Somebody most leagues is gonna jump on that bandwagon. I mean, good for the coaches for diversifying and doing something different. It's the kind of mon that you're normally seeing on rosters nowadays.
Yeah, and to follow that up, I would like to actually highlight down here Tapu Bulu. I think that Tapu Bulu, for me, I was putting that as one of the Pokemon that I think should have been A tier. I think that after the DLC, Tapu Bulu getting like close combat and the big one, Play Rough now, it's just fantastic. It can break, it can be a bulky setup, it can survive forever with leftovers, grassy terrain, Horn Leech, and I think that it does enough that in tier B, if you pick this thing up, you're probably increasing your value no matter what Pokemon you swapped it out for. Of course, as long as it's a strategic swap.
No HP Poison's come on. Really big deal. Because, Poison's not the most common, just moose that's hanging out there. Whereas you may find a random fire move hanging out on some mons that kind of doesn't make sense. You don't find Sludge Bomb or Sludge Wave hanging out on a lot of mons that maybe it doesn't make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Like, a lot of people do really value those poison types, but I see more often than not, people end up picking up their poison types in, tier E or D, and so they aren't maybe the premier offensive threats of the team, unlike a lot of, maybe an ice type or something like that. So
I want to highlight Megaladios. The reason I want to highlight Megaladios is this. If you're looking to win a match, you're not looking at team synergy, you're not looking at supporting a mon the best that it can be supported. You're just saying, I need to add one mon that will win games. There is no mon on this entire list that can win games easier than Megaladios. That's my statement. Sticking to it. Don't care if you disagree. That's what I believe. Megaladios by itself, throw a calm mind on it, and win matches 100% without support. There's not a lot of mons out there that can say that, but it can, and it can say it with emphasis. It's A tier. It's a big change for a roster. I get all of that. Megaladios by itself is good enough to win matches.
yeah, and also in the DLC, which this league allows, it now has Aura Sphere and Mystical Fire. So those steel types that used to give it a lot of problems now between those two moves, you probably have coverage to hit any steel type you ever wanted to. So even more reason to just click moves on it, because you aren't going to have an opponent who can resist all of them.
True.
I would like to actually move down all the way to E tier to highlight something that maybe a lot of people don't think about. I think that something kind of interesting that's laying around, maybe it's not the most amazing. I think that Frostlass can add a lot to a team. And maybe you'll have to hear me out on this, but for E tier, Frostlass is going to give you a really good speed tier. It gives you good spike support. It has a lot of good utility moves. And a lot of teams are lacking maybe that ice type offensive or that ghost type offensive, which are two of the types that I always hound on. You want to have one of those two because there are a lot of Pokemon weak to those types and very few who can resist Ghost, and between the two of them, you can actually run a pretty effective offensive one too, which means a lot of these people who have maybe used all three of their regular transactions can still make that one E tier transaction, and maybe Frostlass could add what you're maybe lacking.
It's a great mon. It's a great mon. It's much, I want to say much more, but it is great value for the price. Looking at value for the price, what Frostlass offers up an E tier, it's a pretty good pick. I want to highlight mon that is a personal love of mine, but you know what's been crazy good this season? If I just tell you right now, just name the mon, it's been crazy good this season.
Klefki.
You know what you're going to say? It's Klefki. You know what really performs well against Klefki? Tier D Magmortar. I love Magmortar. The dude hits like a truck. It can run boots. It can run belly drum. It can run. I've swept with belly drum mock punch. Also, just like Specs Fire Blast, it gets Thunderbolt, it gets Earthquake. It pretty much has all the coverage it needs to be able to hit things and hit things really hard. Red tier Demon, about as good of a nuke as you can get, in particularly on the special side. When I'm looking at him on like Klefki, who's doing way better than it deserves to. You're looking at staring down this Klefki and you're thinking, golly, this is a problem. I need to deal with it. Here's you an option. It's a cheap option. Almost every team could probably get D change and okay, because that's the thickest tier. You get 4 picks from D. That's a mon that maybe you want to think about. Maybe that's an option for you and for your team.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've never personally used or seen Magmortar used a ton because I am fairly new to this and I haven't seen a lot of people draft it. But when I do look at that move pool, I see how many options it has. Priority, speed boosting with flame charge, all kinds of stuff that I could certainly see how this would be an amazing pickup for a lot of teams.
Well, and I just think about match Peach just had with TCP and how he didn't have a way to stab super effective hit Klefki. How would that match have looked if he had a Magmortar? Maybe it would have looked a little bit different. I don't know. But it certainly at least would have been more threatening.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that if you face TCP next week or the week after, go ahead and make this transaction. Your number one ticket to beating TCP right here.
Someone may do it. Who knows? But I am saying, when you're looking to prep against a team, one thing that I suggest, one thing that I like to do, is usually my prep for week 5 is done by the Sunday of week 4. I'm counting transactions in that prep. It's something that I do that I think helps me. I'm prepping a week ahead and I'm looking at, all right, if I want to make a transaction here, to pick something up, bring into this matchup that's going to help me, I'm prepping far enough in advance that it gives me the opportunity to do that. And sometimes that's a bit predictive. It is. But I've made transactions this season where I didn't bring that Mon in the very next week. You know what I'm saying? So I try to be a little bit predictable or unpredictable with that. It is something that I consider, and I give myself that opportunity by prepping a week ahead.
Yeah. So I think though I've highlighted the two that I wanted. Do you have any other additions that maybe you want to talk about?
I definitely hit on the ones that I was thinking, but the point isn't necessarily just to point to these few mods and say, look here, look here, look here, look here, but it's just to say if your season's not going the way that you want it to go, whatever that means for you, if it's not going the way you want it to go, there's 500 mons, you know?
Yeah.
Look at them. Think about what maybe could make your season better, and don't be hesitant to pull the trigger. You only got so many weeks to make this thing work out. If it's not going the way you want it to, do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that that can probably be good. I'm sure this is probably like the longest one that we've had so far. But uh yeah, I think that's it for at least anything I can think of. Do you want to go ahead and sign us off?
Sure. Yeah. Week 4, man, in the books. Week 5 matches have already happened. I can tell you that they're exciting. So I would stick around. I wouldn't miss it. And we'll see you next week.
Yep. See you next week, everyone.